Hello everyone, you're welcome back to the channel. This is Yuklo Fashion and thank you so much for stopping by. In our tutorial class today, I'll be sharing the making of this corset top with square neckline. My real measurements are the ones I label with RM, while the ones I use for the corset, I subtracted 2 inches from the real measurement, so I used that for the corset measurement, but the waistline I subtracted 4 inches from the real measurement. That's because I want the waist snatch a bit, and I divided everything by 4, so that was the one I wrote QM on, that is quarter measurement of the corset. The purpose of this reduction is just because of the lacing bar at the back, so that the lacing can come out well. I have already drafted the bodice pattern. This is for the front. Next, I marked the nipple to nipple span, which is 3.5 inches. This is for the dart, and I marked that. I started from the chest line down to the top length. Next, I placed my tape at the under bust and I marked 1 inch at the center front and at the side front, and I connected that to the bust point using my straight ruler. Next, I connected it down to the blouse length or the top length. So this is what it looks like. Next, I placed back the tape at the under bust again just to reshape the dart. And at the under bust, I marked ½ inch, and at the hem, I marked 2 inches, and I proceed to connect with my straight ruler. And I used my cuff ruler to connect it from the under bust again to the bust point. That's for the center front. For the side front, I also used my cuff ruler just to bring out the cuff shape there. You can see what it looks like now. So please don't mix it up. You can see our new dart. I then placed my tape again at the chest line, and I marked ½ inch at the center front again and at the side front, and I proceed to connect it back to the bust point using my cuff ruler this time. After that, I then proceed to the neckline to mark the square neckline. So for that, I marked 4.5 inches for the width. Then I used my straight ruler to connect it to the chest line. And because it's a square neckline, I'll need to create a curve there. So I use freehand for this curve, and I link it with the side front this way. You can see. Now we are done with the neckline. Next is the strap, and for the strap I use 1.5 inches for the strap. And from that point I wrote it down to the chest line again. And if you look closely, the armhole is somehow wide. So because of that, I placed my cuff ruler and we connect the arm side. I just mark it down to the bust point because of how wide it is. Next, I reshape the shoulder slope. The shoulder slope is a bit down, so I just measure 1/4 inch and connect back to the neckline. Now we are done with the shoulder slope. I then proceed to the hem. So the measurement I use for the shoulder to top length is 20.5 inches. I did not use the normal top measurement. That's because it's high hip. It ends at the high hip. So I marked 1 inch below the waistline. And also I used the measurement of the waist for the high hip measurements. That's because of how the shape of the top is. So the 1 inch I marked below the waistline, I curved it back to the high hip measurement. So we are done with the front pattern. So I just decided to show where the boning casing will be on my pattern, and at the center front I marked 2 inches. At the bust point I marked 1.5 inch. At the waist I marked, at the under bust I marked 1 inch, and still marked 1 inch at the waistline till it reaches the hem. So this is just to create like a slant shape for the boning casing. So I use broken lines for the boning casing. And for the other boning casing, I marked 2 inches at the ham side, and at the under bust I marked 1 inch till it reaches the hem, and I also connect with my ruler using broken lines as well. Now we are done. I had to sketch everything out with my marker to make it more visible, and I proceed to cut the pattern. So this is our front pattern. Next I proceed to the back, and I've also drafted the bodice pattern for the back, and I've also marked the nipple to nipple span, which is serve as the guide for the darts. And at the half length I marked ½ inch at the side back and at the center back, and connected it to the bust point, and also connect it back to the hem. So at the center back I marked ½ inch, and I marked the ½ inch right from the chest line down to the hem and connected with my ruler. This is just for the lacing bar at the back. And I also proceed to mark the neckline. You remember it's square shape at the front, so I still maintain the square shape at the back here as well. And I proceed to use my marker to make it more visible. So this is the front and the back, and I also use my marker to create arrow to show which will be connected to which. So I've gone ahead to cut out the pattern on my fabric, and I added necessary allowances to it. I've also added interface and cut lining. I also added interface to the lining as well. I then stitched the center front together, and I ironed it open inside. Next I stitched the side front together with it, and this is what it looks like. I've ironed everything open, and I've also stitched the lining as well. Next is to create my boning casing, and to do that I first measure the circumference of the boning round. So I have 1 inch here rather, and the boning casing I marked 1.5. You can see I measured 1.5 for the boning casing, and I folded this way, so I will stitch the ½ inch, that is the 0.5 inch. I'll stitch the edge and also the side as well. So after stitching, this is how to go about it. This is the wrong side, so I'll just use the boning to push it out. Then I'll cut the joint part at the edge and iron. So this is what it looks like, and I've also marked where the boning casing will be fixed. So I proceed to pin the boning casing on the fabric. So this is everything. That's the boning casing. Next I measured the inches I needed for the boning, and I proceed to fix the boning inside. So for the cuffed part, I want to show you how to go about any part that is curved. To fix your boning, you first measure where the cuff starts from. So this is where it starts from. I then melt the plastic boning a bit. Don't let it be too much. So after that, I placed it back and just pin it down a bit and try to reshape it to meet up with the cuff, to blend with the cuff of that bust side. And I proceed to fixing my boning into the boning casing. Now this is the back. That's for the lining. This is the real fabric, and I picked the center back and the side back together and proceed to stitch. So while stitching the back, I only stitch one side of the lining and not stitch the other side, and that's because of the modesty panel. And the length I used for this modesty panel is 12.5 and the width is 9.5. So I cut two of these. That's because I'll use one for facing and also the other for the main bodies. So this is the lining and this is the length of the lining. You know, I've removed the neckline, so I have like 14 inches left here. Next, I proceed to pin the modesty panel together. You can see I've added the interface to the line to the modesty panel. So I'll stitch 3 sides and leave the last one open. Now I'm done stitching. The next thing is to fix the modesty panel in between the lining. You know the lining is in pair, so I'll just place the modesty panel in between the two and ensure that I left seam allowance there. So I left ½ inch for seam allowance at the neckline. Then I proceed to stitch. First of all, I pinned it down, then I proceed to the machine to stitch. So that's about the modesty panel. Next, I pick the main fabric, the front and the back bodies, and I pin the allowance I added for seam and proceed to stitch on the machine. So this is what it looks like after the stitch. Then after stitching, I also added boning casing to the 2 sides and I proceed to stitch on it and insert the boning. So after that, I picked the lining. I've also joined the lining the way I did for the main fabric. I've joined both front and back together. I then stitched the neckline together. At first I stitched the front neckline and also stitched the back neckline and proceed to iron them. I also stitched the arm side alongside, and next I proceed to stitch the shoulder. So for the shoulder, if you have your interlocking machine, you can just stitch once and lock it, but because I don't have it here, I had to stitch it twice. I first stitched at the right side like 1/4 inch, then fold it this way and stitch again at the wrong side. You know, I first stitched the right side, so I stitched the wrong side, then I top stitched on it. So you can see that's how I did the two, and I flipped the lining on the fabric this way. I pinned it round and proceed to stitch the hem together. Now we are done with the hem. You can see the last part now is the lacing bar. At first I stitched the open part at the back. After stitching the two together, that is the lining and the main fabric, I chalked where the lacing holes will be because I don't plan using eyelet for this. I used holes for the lacing, and after fixing the lacing bar, I measured 2 inches from the remaining fabric and I added interface. I ensure what I cut is longer than the back, and I folded little inches like 1 inch inside, and at the edge here I ironed ½ inch in. Then I folded it twice like this. You can see the way I folded it, one, then I folded it twice and pinned all around and proceed to stitch on it. So this is the first stitch. This is our boning casing. So I proceed to stitch again at the edge, and after the stitch I inserted the boning and also locked the hem so as not to allow the boning to fall out. So thank you very much for watching this video to the end. See you in my next video. Bye.